Welcome to the Evolve, Move, Play podcast, where we bring you the most interesting and enlightening conversations around movement practice and how you can become the most heroic version of yourself through pursuing movement that's relevant to your nature. This is a podcast that's going to feature some of the top movers in the world, some of the most amazing movement thinkers, and people from fields that are related to movement as far afield as evolutionary theory, strength and conditioning, and everything in between. So if you're interested in movement, please stick around. And if you like our work and want to support it, please consider supporting us on Patreon, because this podcast is completely listener supported. We don't want to take any advertising. We don't want to interrupt your experience of watching the show. So what really helps us get the best thinkers on, have the time to put these together, have the best quality for you guys as far as audio and video, is your support. So please consider supporting us and enjoy the rest of the show.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Evolve, Move, Play podcast. This week, my guests are Rene Scavington and Tom Coppola from the Origins Parkour facility in Vancouver BC and the Sport Parkour League. So Tom and Rene are old friends of mine, guys I love to train with, guys I love to talk to, and guys who have really been at the forefront of creating a competitive format for parkour. So if you're interested in parkour as a sport and how we prepare for parkour as a sport, for the history of how it's developed, it's going to be a really interesting conversation. These are brilliant guys, really amazing movers, and really thoughtful teachers. And the program that they've created at Origins and through Sport Parkour is really one of the most amazing legacies in the parkour industry. So I was really excited to have them on, and I'm really excited to share this conversation with you guys. Definitely be having them on again. And without further ado, enjoy Tom and Rene. Rene, Tom, been meaning to have you guys on for a really long time. So it's good to have you guys. Welcome on the Evolve, Move, Play podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so you guys own a parkour gym up in Vancouver, BC, and you know we go back. Jesus, when did we meet, Rene?
Probably like 04, 05.
05, maybe 05, yeah. It was like the first international parkour jam, right? Canada and the US coming together.
I think it was a SFU jam. So it's Simon Fraser University.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Simon. I remember that. Yeah.
You, Tyson Cheka, and Dane.
Yep. Yeah, that was a long time ago. Yeah, it must have been 2006, 2007. So yeah, been a while. And yeah, we built our gym down here in Seattle, and then you guys built your gym, and there's a lot of back and forth for a few years there, but then it seems like it's kind of died down, and everyone's, our scene's died down in that way, and you guys have been built up, but you guys have really taken the lead in something we were all kind of doing, which is building out some sort of competition structure for parkour. So that was one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about, but yeah, let's start there. How COVID's a weird situation, right? But you guys have been building Sport Parkour for a long time, and I was curious to kind of just dig into what that project has meant to you guys, where it's going, how it's developed. So why do you think that you guys kind of ended up being the team that devoted themselves to actually creating a competitive format for parkour? More so than, say, anybody else in the world?
That's an interesting question. I do think a lot of people have tried, and I guess it kind of, for me, it actually goes back to you. It was in 2010, I competed in one of your, it wasn't called a parkour competition at the time. It was, it was a riff on Ninja Warrior, and there was like a sled pull at the beginning of the course, and then after that there was like some sort of rope swing, and then there was some parkour elements too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that was my first exposure to parkour competition, and that was in the first Parkour Visions space, where and to me that was like the first parkour gym that I had been exposed to and seen and thought of as like an actual parkour gym.
Yeah.
I mean, the other ones existed, like Primal Fitness, Monkey Vault, but at the time they didn't really have much parkour elements to it. And that first small Parkour Visions gym was really cool. It was really inspiring to me personally. And I think just participating in the competitive nature of that event kind of sparked something in me that took me from that anti-competitive spirit that I was initially involved with in the early days of my parkour experience, and made me, it kind of opened my eyes to like, actually, this is like a pretty cool experience that a lot of people, if they had the experience, they would probably switch sides, so to speak.
Were you ever on the forums with the little like banner, pro parkour, against competition? Was that you?
I ever had the banner, but I definitely like was part of that team.
I was like one of the 3 guys who was organizing that. It's like me, Erwin LaCour from MoveNat, and Duncan Germain. That was like the main guys behind it. And then of course I went on to switch sides. What about you, Rene? Were you ever anti-competition, or were you always into it?
I had really terrible experiences my first 2 times competing. I get the shakes, so yeah, like even like maybe like right now a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I get the shakes, which is like amplified if there's like any anxiety, which I had a ton of, because it felt like a performance, like beyond a performance though, like a performance in front of regular people. They don't know what they're saying. You know, you could do like the most simple thing and it's like impressive, but it was a performance in front of peers. And that's the thing about competition in parkour, is it's the proving ground. So, you know, you can be viewed as so good, and then you're put in front of the challenges with your peers in front of other people. And it's like, go, you get, you know, X amount of attempts or whatever. And I think that really got to me first time that I had to do comp. And then we did another one, and I think I pulled, that was the one at Freeway Park. So both in Seattle again. Like it's, you know, I feel like if there's ever a history book written on competition in parkour, the Seattle team or yourself should be viewed as like some of the pioneers. At least because I don't think there was there was, you've done an article on this before where there was a European competition or something early on, and then that fizzled, and it was basically Seattle was where parkour competitions were happening at that time. So yeah, the second one at Freeway Park, I pull out halfway because again, I'm going through the course and I'm realizing my legs are shaking on me, and it's not like a fatigue thing. It's literally like a nerve thing that I hadn't experienced before. But then I moved on, and I think it was the Tempest Games was the first time I had a positive experience doing a competition. None of these experiences like ruined it for me because we were trying to do our own things. But in terms of participating, it was something that I had to take some time to get over. But I think that's normal with any kind of competition environment. Like if you did martial arts or something, you go from sparring to actually competing in a match, and you can have that same sort of experience.
Yeah. The first competition at PKV that Tom was talking about, I actually had a panic attack. Yeah. So I was in the middle of like, I just cut a massive amount of weight. I cut like 20 pounds in like 3 months or something like that. And then I was organizing the competition and trying to compete in the competition. So I was like demonstrating the course and then turning around and trying to run in it. And like during the demonstration of the course, I just fell off in a bunch of weird places that I normally wouldn't. And everyone was trying to talk to me because I was the organizer. So it was like, everyone was like in my face. And then all of a sudden I just couldn't get any words out. So yeah, been there. Yeah. So Tempest, so we did our first competition, I guess that was 2010, and then Tempest was 2013. I remember going to Tempest. I was like, I think that was right before I left Parkour Visions, because I went down there with Nate Weston. So that was a while ago. So you see, that was like 3 years that you'd been kind of floating around with competitions, but you guys had already held a competition, I think, by that point. I remember you guys did one in a park. It was pretty cool. I remember Justin Sweeney went up there and did pretty well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. What year did you come here?
So I moved here in 2010. And then that first one, that was PKBC 5. So that would have been like 2011, I think. It was my first PKBC.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2011 would have been the first competition that we organized together. And then it's just been consistent since then. Like we haven't missed a year as far as doing like the bigger ones
until 2020.
Until 20.
Damn you, COVID.
Yeah.
I missed that one.
Yeah.
But even for like the smaller ones, like we'll test ideas and stuff here before traveling or doing any pro events. But at this time, I think we can confidently say that no one has organized as many competitions as we have. So there you go.
Yeah, unless you count like Red Bull.
No, I'm talking about qualifiers. I'm talking about like we've traveled the North Americas.
Yes.
And done many a competition.
So I have a sense that that you guys took that on also because there was something that you were looking for, something that was attractive to you about the idea of bringing competition into parkour, right? And so I'm curious, maybe speak to that for a second, and I'll have a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, I have a comment on that. So at the time, the biggest parkour competition events that were happening were style-based, free running, right? So at the time they weren't called style; they were called free running or competition. Barclay Card, Red Bull Art Motion. And I remember specifically having a conversation with Rene about parkour competition, and I don't remember if it was you or me said this, but it was we were saying like the idea of parkour, like the original concept of parkour, is too cool to not like showcase in a competitive format, to bring it to not just to showcase it, but to like allow athletes to have the opportunity to participate in it. So we really wanted to develop out the side of like the skill and the speed elements of parkour competition, because it's just too cool not to. Like, so much emphasis was being placed on like, people doing like tricks and things that were aesthetic, and it's judged, and it's kind of almost gymnastic like and in its appearance and the way it's presented. But we were like, well, like the idea that parkour is a method of like reach or escape is like never touched on in competition, or not in large scale competition. And so we saw something was essentially missing, and we wanted to really like develop that out so that it presented parkour in a way that's like, no, like this is what parkour is. So and now parkour has like a very expansive definition that includes all different types of styles and movements, but ultimately it kind of came down to the core idea of we wanted parkour, like traditional parkour, to be showcased a little bit more.
It's interesting because I had the same, that was really one of my takes on it when I first started bringing the competition as well, was like, we're trying to fight against competition in order to preserve parkour, but parkour was already sort of disappearing and being diluted into urban acrobatics, in a sense, if you were really interested in the reach or escape aspect of it. I remember it was Teg Matthews Palmer who said, like, there's already competition in parkour, right? Like, everyone's competing to have the best YouTube video, right? And what was winning in the best YouTube videos, and sort of has continued to win with the strange exception of Storer, right? Storer is the one exception over there. But otherwise, it's almost always the acrobatic-based videos that get the most attention. And so that original idea of the discipline was sort of being, was disappearing. So that was part of my motivation for getting involved in bringing competitions forward. But you guys have always you've always had the style, the skill, and did you always have skill as well? Or is it always style and speed and the skill was added later?
The first time we did NAPC, it had skill.
Yes.
But before that, that was the move. That was the first time we put it into. Or wait a second, no, it was the skill qualifier. It's like always the.
So going back to the first one we did outside at the park in 2011, that one had a skill qualifier. So it had a bunch of challenges, and you had to get a score based on the challenges, and that qualified you into the speed competition. So it was like really accessible. It was kind of like a jam format. And at the end of that, then it was like, if you scored enough points, you got into be able to run the speed event. So that was our first foray into skill competition. And then the second one was in the gym. And that was it was the competition that eventually became NAPC. It was PKBC 6. And Justin came up and did really well in that one as well. And that one had a skill competition. I think it was separate. And
no, that one was still,
because it had like Kong precision as far as you can. It was like a powerlifting meet. It's like, see how far you can go.
Well, we were combining the skill and speed still.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was like you got like a total score.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, because we did that too. And I'm trying to remember if we got the idea from you. I think Tyson was also really interested in like a rock climbing format, like as a way of bringing competition in. And so I remember in 2012 when we did the invitational, we had a series of challenges that were like, so there was a giant, standing cat between two, like those big pillars at Gasworks. And then there was the stride series on top of the two fences over the sand, right? So remember that. And then also, I guess, so that was 2012, but then also there was Tempest Games in 2013. Tempest had that huge, like full day of skill competition, very sort of like parkour decathlon-esque. And so that was kind of the format, but you guys have moved in a different direction. You've moved away from sort of like just really simple benchmark skills towards more like the rock climbing style, where it's about a specific challenge that happens to be within a family. So you're not going to be able to have, say, a direct cross comparison from one year to another, where, okay, this year Mish did a Kong precision 6 inches farther than the previous year, and the setup's exactly the same. So tell me a little bit about why you guys have gone to that new format, and kind of what the skill section is.
So that was after the competition that we had just mentioned. So the pre-NAPC one, but I think you even saw a bit of that in the first NAPC, where we had just options where it was like, here's one Kong vault to precision, here's a slightly further one, or whatever. And as we were kind of starting to get away from the idea of numbers, so the competition before that was all about numbers. We had a bunch of dynos that you could do that were just progressively higher. We had a standing precision that got progressively further, and we had a Kong precision that got progressively further. And those were like the big three. It's still a lot of fun, and it's fun to test those things, but we found with that, we weren't necessarily going to get the best parkour athlete. We were maybe just going to get the best athlete, or the most powerful person at the competition. So that's the main reason why we moved away from it. And it's continued to evolve quite a bit with how we combine things. Because for a while we were still on the singular skill, but we were just trying to make it more technical. So having more variety with the structures in place, because what is parkour without thin walls, rails, things that are hard to grip, all those different varieties of structures to use that, again, make it harder for someone who's just a powerful athlete to do super well in parkour. And then, of course, there's also heights and consequences and things like that, which make us different than something like Ninja Warrior that's over water, So that's the direction we moved into, is trying to make our skill competition feel more like the competitions you would have at jams, the stuff you would do with your buddies at jams, where you're all trying to hit the same challenge on some weird wall feature, and have some sort of creativity along with the power and everything you're trying to put into it.
Yeah. We wanted to get away from the numbers game. That I feel like that really sterilized it in a way. That was just not in an interesting direction. We wanted to really put forward the idea that like you can't divorce the complexity from parkour, and if you do, it ends up turning into this just like who can jump the furthest, rather than like the last big event that we hosted, we were talking about like the finals for skill, like that should be an Instagram clip. Like it should be something that people are so stoked about that it goes viral on Instagram, like the way it looks. And you don't get that with just like, ooh, you jumped really far between two kickers, you know? So, I feel like you can't really divorce if you do try to take out the complexity from the parkour skill challenges, then you end up with the Tempest games, which it was a cool experience participating in it, but it's not the coolest format to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it ends up, it's basically like parkour decathlon or parkour track and field, right?
Yeah, mind you, we have yet to see, just to kind of, I think we always do this too. We're always like critical of our own format, but we have yet to see if that type of format would catch on, because it is more inclusive.
Sure.
Someone could watch that. You could watch people doing kongs for distance into a sand pit, and lâcher for distance over a bunch of mats and things like that, and think, if you're a fit person, like, oh, I could get into something like that,
Yeah, I mean, well, now I'm thinking about it. It's like, you look at like strongman competitions, and a lot of it's just like how much more can you lift in this weird way,
but those weird ways, like the boulder, like they're still categorized. They still have the same, they're still lifting the big boulders. It doesn't, and they don't change like weird shaped boulders. They're these big round things that they all feel the same to carry. They're just different weights.
Yeah, so you're looking at like how do we capture sort of like fundamental athletic attributes versus dexterity, right? I've got the book right next to me. Have you guys read Bernstein, Dexterity and Its Development?
No, but I'm familiar with a little bit of Bernstein's work.
Yeah,
Dude.
But that's just what it makes me think of, right? Like when you divorce all those other technical aspects of it, that's what you're taking out. You're taking out the dexterity demand, right? And that's really what we're interested in as parkour athletes, is becoming more dexterous in general, not simply becoming more powerful within any specific technique, right? Because when we go out into the environment, the power within a specific technique is only useful to our ability to adapt it to the actual circumstances. And that's what I think a lot of us end up getting a kick out of, the adapting it to the circumstances, right?
Yeah, I agree. That's what's always been most exciting to me about parkour, is the finding the environment and letting the environment tell me what I'm going to be doing, rather than like I'm going to go out and do this one specific skill. Maybe, sometimes that's good for practice and that's good for developing skills. But what excites me about parkour is the environment telling me what to do. That's where like the creative element is. That's where like the there's something about like the treasure hunting of that's associated with parkour. That's like you find like this really weird back alley spot that nobody else wants to touch, but I really want to touch it because it does something for me mentally.
Yeah.
I think that's what's cool. What ends up being cool about parkour is what you end up finding out of what most people would see as just a wheelchair access ramp.
There is an element of like playing to your strengths, but looking for certain challenges.
Oh, yeah.
So you know, like if you're good at dynos or dive rules, your eye might wander to those things, and you might walk by a spot that's telling you to do other things.
That's
So
absolutely true. Yeah.
if a spot is telling you to do a roof gap, you might walk by it and instead do the dyno at the other spot that's telling you to do the dyno. Or you know, the other way
I
around.
didn't say I didn't have selective vision.
Everybody does. Everybody does. Yeah.
This is a sort of a different line of questioning, but since we've bumped into it, I think it's an interesting line of questioning. So Tom, you know, as Rene is referring to, you're well known for your sort of application of bouldering skills, buildering skills to parkour, and for diving through small gaps, right? Every time that I find a really weird dive roll, I send it to you, tag you. So I think that's important, right? Like there's this, I see, like in the kind of history of physical culture, we went to this place that was very reductionist and was all about, you know, like just do aerobics, or you just do bodybuilding. And when you do bodybuilding, you just do these specific, and then you just do the specific muscles, right? And everyone was kind of specialized into their sports. And, you know, people were like, you need to specialize in football or baseball at an earlier and earlier age. And then it feels like to me, since maybe the beginning of the aughts, there's been this rebound back towards the idea of being a generalist, right? CrossFit came in and they were like talking about general elite fitness and what is real fitness. And then, you know, then there's MovNat, my stuff, and Ito stuff, and parkour in a way is like, has I think something of a generalist ethic too. But one thing I've discovered in my own journey is like, if you try too much to be a generalist, it's kind of homogenizing and boring. Like there's a reason that we all have different personalities and different abilities, because then we kind of can play off of each other's strength. Like there's lots of dive rolls I wouldn't have done if I didn't watch your videos. You know, lots of people have tagged me because they're like, oh my God, I'm in a tree. So Ryan Ford said to me once, he's like, you can't just be good at parkour anymore. Like nobody cares if you're good at parkour. You have to be good at parkour and then do something specific, right? Because in that way, that's like your gift to the community. It's like, I see this thing that nobody else would see, and I'll bring it to you guys so you can see it too. So I'm just curious, like, what your perspective is on that, and like, how did you end up being the dive holes guy?
I mean, I think I have a pretty strong belief that like you should play to your strengths. Doesn't necessarily mean you should completely ignore your weaknesses, but you should, you know, develop things that you find that you might be good at. And that's because if you happen to be good at it, you might actually like doing it because you get reward for doing well at something, right? And so, I mean, I guess going back to like how I became the dive holes guy, it started as I used to train with Daniel Arroyo, who many people will not know who he is nowadays, but at the time he was, you know, a very much up and coming star, very fast learner, was able to pick up skills faster than anybody I had ever met. And I remember we were doing we were going to do a line together, and he's like, oh, you know, you do this going over, and then I'm going to dive roll through this. And I was like, whoa, dive roll through it. And so he ended up like hitting his back really hard on it, and it just like messed it up. And then I ended up doing it like right after. And I was like, oh, I did it, but Arroyo couldn't? What? Like what? So it was kind of this eye-opening experience where it was like, oh, like maybe this is something that I could be good at, because the guy that's good at everything messed up. And, you know, maybe that was a fluke, and maybe he normally would be able to do it fine. And it was just, but whatever it was, it kind of set something, it kind of like triggered something in my head. And now, or well, not now, but at the time I opened up my vision to like seeing more opportunities in that direction. And so I just kind of, anytime I saw it, I was like, oh, that looks like a nice challenge. So I'm going to attempt that one. And through that process, I ended up learning a bunch of techniques for allowing me to do increasingly complex ones. And then by doing increasingly complex dive pulls challenges, and it just ended up catching on in a sense on social media. People would, recognize that I was the guy doing, threading diving movements. And so it kind of just snowballed from there. And because people were saying like, oh, that's good. Or, oh, Tom, can you fit through this one? It just ended up, again, like triggering me to continue looking for more of those. So it definitely gave me that selective vision of what challenges I was aiming to do. So I guess that's kind of like how I kind of got into it. And yeah, and I don't know, I do think that you should play on your strengths, because like that's where you have the most opportunity to affect change in the world, I guess, in a way. And the same goes for climbing. Like, I rarely ever do any actual bouldering, but because it doesn't inspire me. I'm not super excited to go to a bouldering gym or whatever. But rather I just developed the dynamic climbing side of parkour, and I, for whatever reason, I happened to be good at it fairly early on, and I started just kind of progressing, and then developed into the athlete I am today, where I have two very strange specialties that don't seem to really fit together at all, but that's who I am. So
yeah. So how much of your training time do you spend on like pursuing your specialty versus trying to make sure that you can keep playing the game, right? Like play the game. If you go to a jam and like, hey, there's not a great climbing spot or there's a great dive rolling spot, or you're like, shit, man, I've lost. I'm not as good at jumping as these other guys. This isn't as interesting right now. Or do you find you're able to kind of balance that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I spend, I go through these like phases in my training of like obsession with certain movements. So there was a period of time where I was obsessed with rail kongs.
Okay.
And so, and anywhere I went, I was only looking for rail kongs. And if I didn't find one, or if I came across another challenge I was interested in, I would do that. But I find that I go through kind of like obsessions with kind of movements. And there was a period where I was very obsessed with dive pulls, and then that kind of went away for a while, but I would still do it if I found something that was exciting to me. And so, yeah, I don't know. I like doing different types of jumps and things like that as well. I like doing kongs. It's a skill that I enjoy doing. I'm not particularly excited about flips, but every now and then I'll get the flip bug, and I'll just kind of delve into that for a while. So I don't tend to think of my training as like I must maintain all of these skills all at the same time at different levels, but it's more just like I'm a little bit more chaotic in my approach to parkour. I like to do what I see and I'm excited about. So
Rene, what's your kind of philosophy around this idea of generalization versus specialization? It sounds like to me like you might be over there saying, hey, Tom, maybe you should try something that's not a dive roll every once in a while.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like Tom practices a variety of things. Like I've never, I think that's actually been more of a, I guess I'll say recent, not super recent, but more recent development. Because I do remember like the rail kong phases and stuff like that, where I think we all did that. I think we went through a phase in just practicing parkour, and it could have been where we were like age wise, could have been what was on video, but I feel like there was a phase where we would go out for sessions and no one would do a lot. We would just like walk by, get to a spot and be like, do this jump here. Okay, yeah, there's nothing really. Let's explore some more. Let's go find somewhere else, because the next spot is surely going to have what I want to do at it. And I definitely felt that for a couple of years, where we just we'd have some really unproductive in terms of like movement wise sessions. And more recently, like I can't think of a session where you've just sat around, like it's, even if there aren't any dynos or dive pulls, So I think that's just been a development in general. Is you still keep up the the generalness while yes, like exploiting what you're what you're good at.
I think what's changed for me is the types of challenges I want to do are the ones that give me a little bit of fear initially that I know I can break through. And so whether that's a dive hole or a jump at height or even just like balancing in a weird way that just kind of is a little bit scary, that's what I'm more attracted to. So I'm more like, and you know, unless it's completely outside of my range of ability, like I'm not going to look for the spot to do the double cork because I can't do double corks. But yeah, so
double cork roof gaps into step through to double cork again with Verkey.
I wanted to make a point about like generalization and like specialization though. And actually, Rafe, so how many of your viewers would you say pay attention to UFC?
I don't know. Probably not that many.
You don't think so? Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Like,
how many know who Khabib Nurmagomedov is?
I have no idea. Really don't. Like, I pay attention to it. I care, right? But like even the people I train with, right? Like I'll ask like Justin, hey, do you pay? You know, like that. I don't know if you guys saw the Figueiredo fight with was it Moreno? That fight was insane, right? So I was out training with Justin. I was like, Justin and Brian Prince, and I was like, hey, you guys pay attention to MMA? They're like, nah, right?
Yeah. So I don't want to steer the conversation too much away from parkour, but I feel like it's just a good example. If you look at the growth of MMA as a sport, is about 5 years ago, everyone, or like the GSP area, the George St. Pierre era, everyone was sold on that you had to be this well-rounded fighter, like just perfectly well-rounded in everything. You couldn't be a jiu-jitsu specialist, you couldn't be a striking specialist, you had to do everything. And George St. Pierre was the guy who was just demolishing everybody because he was that guy. He could strike very well, and then he also had this wrestling prowess that he could just decide where the fight took place, and whether it was he had a great jab too, just all these tools that basically allowed him to dictate exactly what he wanted to do in a fight. And that was the model for a long time. And now you have a guy like Khabib, who is very much a grappling specialist, so much to the point that people know exactly what he's going to do going into a match, and he still does it. So you have this sort of divide now, and he still, mind you, the fight still starts on the feet, so he still has to be good at striking to an extent, like to fend off, you know, elite competitors. But the fact that he's able to do exactly what he wants to do every time with a singular skill set is crazy. And in so like bringing it back to parkour, yeah, you need to be able to be able to do everything. Like if you want it to be the best at a speed competition or a skill competition, if we're just talking about competition, or even a notable person in videos, but if you're just kind of like well-rounded, you're probably not going to be super great at one of those things. Like I think the best people that we see in skill are, like, I'll use Tim Champion as an example. He has pretty clear specialties. He's a phenomenal jumper and lache artist, we'll call it, swinger. And
I don't know about swinger. I don't think that'll catch.
but I don't think you would note him as like he can do very well at like the dynos and the catbacks and things like that. And he certainly built it. But I think his foundation and his specialty is definitely in those two things. And he can do swings. He can do lashes that no one else can do. No one else is touching like the distance and the scale of some of the lashes he does. Maybe not the same for jumps, but definitely for lashes. I'm sure we could think of like other examples too, but that's probably going to be yet to be seen. I think that's what's going to happen with parkour, particularly like skill competition athletes, is they'll have that one strong specialty, and then everything else will be like enough to make it to like the elite level, but they'll have one thing where it's just like, oh, he's going to flash this challenge because that's his thing.
Yeah.
Or her thing.
Yeah. I would almost say that Daryl Stingley is more specialized in the catbacks and the swings than I would say Tim is. Like, I was just watching the NAPC highlights that you guys put out, and I believe Tim's flashed the Kong pre-Kong challenge like earlier than anybody else. So that's like outside of the skill set that you're talking about. So I think Tim's also just like maybe a better athlete than anybody else, right? Like pure athletically power, you know, what he can do with it. You know, if you had him go play wideout in the NFL, he's going to be a good physical body for that type of thing, right? Whereas, you know, not everybody who's good at parkour has that type of base athleticism. But I wanted to go back to the Khabib versus GSP thing, because I actually think they're really similar, and it's not a very different thing, because Khabib comes from a wrestling background and GSP came from a karate background, and he started as a well-rounded fighter who, you know, he started as a striker and then became well-rounded, and then at the end of his career, he just was a guy who used a reactive jab to reactive takedowns off of his jab to take people down and dominate them in the exact same way that GSP does, that Khabib does. Not using exactly the same techniques. He didn't have some of the high level, he didn't have some of the technical skills that Khabib does. And Khabib came up as a wrestler, but had to become competent as a striker. I mean, Khabib stunned and knocked down Conor McGregor, who's maybe the greatest striker in that division. In the history
that was via threat of a takedown, though. So the uppercut.
Sure. But I mean, you don't do that if you're not competent in some way in striking, right? Like he understands the striking game in MMA and what is allowed to him because of the threat of his takedowns. You know, Ben Askren is a better example of like a full specialist, like genuinely not very competent at striking. And he got exposed as soon as he came to MMA. So I think that like what I would say is happening in MMA is something like you see the level of general ability go up, and then some guys who are relatively generalists start to dominate. And then the specialists hit that level of general ability and then take it to a specialty, right? So you see like
I still can't think of like any current champions who are known as just being like a generalist. Maybe like a Steve Miocic, but like Israel Adesanya, striker. Who can?
I mean, Jan's a new champion, but I don't think he's, you know, I mean, he's got power, but I don't think he's a specialist striker in the same way that Adesanya is. And Kamaru Usman's a pretty damn well-rounded fighter, right? Like, obviously, he comes from
wrestling pedigree, like specialist, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there was always like everyone always had a pedigree. Right.
Well, that's not the case though, because like I'm just following the sport and listening to conversations like years ago was always they were, especially when I got into it, just watching it, it was the talk about like Rogan would talk about this too, where it's like, oh, these new guys coming up, they're people that their first introduction is an MMA gym. So like you're going into an MMA gym and learning MMA from the start instead of a specialty. Whereas like, and so maybe it was never true. Maybe what we're talking about right now is it's never been true. And like, that was just the idea, but that was very much the idea, is that no, you need to train MMA. You can't have like a specialty. Whereas it just kind of keeps being proven that the guys that are the best have a specialty and then they get well-rounded off of that specialty.
But the specialties are also changing. Like Khabib is an MMA grappler, right? Like he's not a wrestler. He doesn't even come from wrestling. He comes from Sambo, right? Like he has a set of skills that are optimized to dominate the grappling within an MMA context, rather than someone like Ben Askren, who came from a really elite wrestling background, who, you know, still has that as kind of a primary identity. So I don't know. We shouldn't get too deep into this. You and I should have this conversation off air, because I'm not sure how interesting this is to the audience. But
if your viewers aren't into MMA at all, but
so one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys, going back to the idea of like sport parkour and what you guys have been done with that, is how do you think it's impacted the development of the discipline in general? Like, how has sport parkour impacted what parkour is and how the community?
That's a good question. Yeah, what comes to mind for you first?
resetting on catbacks.
Explain what that is.
The audience has no idea what you just said.
So we use the term catback to refer to like starting in a hanging position on a wall to jump back away from the wall. It kind of has lots of different terms in the parkour world. A lot of people refer to it as just 180 or another version. And so a lot of times when people will jump into a cat, they'll like bounce or reset their feet and then go for the catback. So there's like additional kind of time in between the cat leap and the actual catback. And one thing in skill competition that we've enforced is that your catback must be dynamic. It must be plyometric. So as soon as you land, you should be already entering into your catback as opposed to allowing any resetting. And so there's skill challenges in our events that we won't count if people take an extra bounce or reset their feet. And so that's actually influenced the greater culture to like, they'll now in their parkour videos, maybe take an extra few attempts to make sure that their catback is actually reactive as opposed to adding those extra bounces. And that's just one example, but there's a couple of others that I feel like our event has kind of shifted people's mindsets in the way that they actually apply their practice. The other big one for me is in style. A lot of people are now understanding of what it means to actually create a line as opposed to a bunch of separate movements that are put together in a way that doesn't really fit. And so I feel like we really pushed we really enforce this is what a line must be in order for it to count. Otherwise it's going to be judged poorly. Like you need to connect it in a line. It needs to make sense logically. And so that's kind of those are a couple in which I feel like we have influenced the greater culture.
Yeah. I remember
this one for a lot. We could probably, because you just said the word style and I was like, ooh, there's one.
Yeah.
Because it's like the whole parkour free running thing.
Yeah.
And we're very much on it's all parkour. And so we just categorize as it's going to be freestyle parkour or style for short. A lot of people use the word style, including our, we'll say, competitors in competition formats have just opted to start calling what was their free running competitions now just a style, like parkour style.
I'm sorry, I was just laughing because I remember when Urban Free Flow announced freestyle parkour and how well that went over with the community. But
did they actually back in the day? Because I don't think it was an original idea from us or anything. If anything, I think our head was on skiing and making the comparison there. But if someone else said it first, it's not.
No, yeah, it was. Do you remember this, Tom?
I do. I vaguely, because I wasn't really around at the time, but I do remember the hit. This
must have been 2006, 2007, probably 2006. There's huge arguments, tons of flame wars on the forums about free running versus parkour, and Urban Free Flow were the guys pushing this sort of not pure parkour, I guess, and they were getting a lot of pushback on that. And they're like, we've solved it. We've solved the debate. We've solved the debate. They hyped it up for a long time. And then they were like, okay, we're announcing it. It's we're just going to call it freestyle parkour. And everyone was like, oh my God, groan, puke. Nobody, it's not a solution. So that was their reaction originally, but it seems to be changing with the idea that we have a there's a.
Mind you, I don't hear people saying that, but it's only in regard to competition. That could change, but
people refer to themselves as style athletes now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, kind of bringing it to this weird parkour versus free running debate. I've always found it kind of stupid to call it two different sports. because it's really a part of the same culture. And so like there's, everyone to some degree practices both, right? A lot of people will say that, right? So, like, you see an Instagram bio, it's like parkour and free running athlete. And I just feel like that's so silly. Like you can practice two different sports in the span of a minute. And I'm very much like a traditional parkour kind of person. I really kind of have this, weird relationship with flips where I just don't really particularly care for them, but I've practiced them to some degree just to have like a base competency, but not really super into them in terms of my own personal practice. And so this whole parkour freerunning thing is so weird that like you would call it something different when you're just doing something slightly different. I don't know. It's weird.
It's funny too, is that like I just interviewed Sebastian Foucan, who coined the term free running, and like he has a whole philosophy around like what his particular school, lineage or whatever you want to call it, of the parkour universe is about, and it has nothing really to do with whether you do flips in your lines or not. But nobody listened to Seb when he was like, well, actually, like, I use that word, like originally it was going to be like just the English word for parkour, right? Because they were afraid that parkour wouldn't translate, which turned out not to be true. But then later it was like, well, okay, if it's going to be a different thing, hey, I started that word. And I was like, no, nobody's listening. So
his evolve, move, play.
Yeah. I mean, now he calls it Foucan method. It's really fascinating stuff. I think you guys will get a lot out of that. But yeah, I love what Seb's up to. But it has been a funny distinction. I don't even like. There's this idea that parkour is the art of getting from A to B as fast and efficiently as possible. Like that's the Wikipedia definition. Like I was like, I don't know how that ever got on Wikipedia. Like I don't know who edited that and how it got approved. It wasn't something that anybody of the founders said directly. And like, I don't remember any of us who are like super involved in the community ever being like, yeah, we all agree that that's the definition. So it's a funny thing, but like, I tend to think about parkour as like, there's the strict sense, and then there's the like broad sense. Like the broad sense is people mucking about with obstacles with just their bodies, right? Like you're playing around on complex structures with just your body. That's parkour. Anything that involves that is parkour as far as I'm concerned. But then there's like the whole David's thing and Sebastian's thing and the Yamakaze, and they all like, I don't think they ever had it fully defined or knew what the hell they were doing as far as like having clarity. It's funny because we had that whole like, we all thought we were fighting for the founders by not having competition. And then David gets involved with FIG, right?
Yeah.
So, and Sebastian loves World Chase Tag, right? He's all about that. He's like, we need to be playing the game. If it's about reach or escape, you got to be chasing somebody or being chased. So I wanted to ask you guys about that. Did you guys check in on the World Chase Tag being on NBC? That's a pretty exciting development for our community.
I haven't seen any of it. I don't have access to
I also do, but I want to. I want to watch it.
I would be interested in watching it. Yeah, we kind of. I don't think that tag is the format through which we want parkour competition to go, and that's why I think we have our mission, which is what we're kind of promoting. But I don't see it as a bad thing. I think if people are introduced to parkour through tag, that's pretty cool. I think it's going to be weird when tag gyms start popping up. It will likely happen, if World Chase Tag continues to grow at this level. So I think that might be a little bit weird. And then if people start training just for tag and like neglecting developing parkour skills, or like forget it. Like, people practice whatever they want, they can call it whatever they want and they can practice whatever they want. But tag is fun. Like I can imagine it's like a really cool like experience as somebody to be able to compete in that. So I don't know. Those are my preliminary thoughts.
What about you?
Yeah, I get it. Like I get the whole, like what Tom's saying, like it's fun and everything. I get super bored watching it.
Really?
Like, yeah, like even if I know the guys, it's just like it's not what I know them for, and not what I'm down to really watch them for. It's like you take someone who's good at a certain sport or activity, and then you kind of put them in a format that they don't prepare for at all, and it's like, go. Let's see what happens. The other thing for me too is like, okay, so we met, years ago, back at the early days of parkour, and like we had a jam at SFU, and we're hitting cat leaps and vaults and things like that. Do you remember when we played tag? Because I don't remember that.
But I've been trying to bring tag into parkour.
Yes, I know you have for like a competition standpoint, which again, it's like I can't say I hate it. I'm not excited about it, and I definitely dread the day where so I tell someone I do parkour, and I dread the day where I tell someone I do parkour and like, oh, have you done tag? I will lose my freaking mind if that becomes like a regular question, similar to like the Office question. That's what it would freaking be to me, is like if someone was like, have you seen the Office episode of parkour? It's like, oh, you must have been on tag, or someone asking if I've done Ninja Warrior. And then the other thing would be if people start asking to build what do they call it, the quad or something. Yeah, they're doing a very good job branding that, by the way. But if someone asks me to like build a freaking tag setup in the gym, which is going to take up like half the space, it's like, no, screw that. So those are my feelings on it. Is just as someone that really likes parkour, it feels like it's becoming a bit of a takeover seeping in, because we're talking about competition influencing the culture. And we do our best to create a format that reflects what we're already seeing happen on the streets, and then just make it, kind of tweak it to make it okay. How do we make this have points? How do we do what we can to again reflect what's going on there, but make it a competition format? Whereas tag is just like we're gonna put in for a tag course, we're gonna put in some structures that parkour athletes would do well on, but they're not, you're not doing parkour.
Yeah, I first of all, I want to say I did play tag like 12 years ago at a parkour competition, or at a parkour jam,
Yeah.
and it was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it was like freeze tag, and you had to go in between people's legs to unfreeze them. And I was doing dive holes through, so it was.
There we go. The Origins.
It was a fun experience, but I think there is something that's pretty cool, is that like parkour athletes have gotten to the point in our training where you could put them into a scenario in which they have to reach or escape, and they can perform. Like I would be really interested to see somebody who's completely non-parkour athlete but very good, I don't know, maybe a track and field athlete, and see how they perform. Like I participated in a game show called Ultimate Tag, which is not World Chase Tag. It was a very strange experience, we'll say, but it was very fun. I enjoyed it, and there was a bunch of non-parkour athletes who were brought in to be other contestants on the show, and for the most part they all did very poorly, because they had to participate on a parkour field. Now that's their stages, or their courses were quite a bit different from World Chase Tag. So like with World Chase Tag, you could in theory just run around the perimeter as a if you're super fast, you could probably get away from some of these parkour athletes. And I'm just really curious to see like how that would go, because right now as it stands, World Chase Tag is 100% parkour athletes, from what I can tell. So I don't know. I do like the idea. I'm not super for World Chase Tag, but I'm not super against them either. I think there's probably positive and negative elements that will come out of this that will definitely impact parkour culture. I see it as like a unique opportunity for parkour to be seen by more people. So I think that's one positive. The negative is people, referencing it to you on the street because they see you do a jump. So
I wouldn't be so. I'll say I'm opposed. I'll say I'm opposed to what I currently see developing, and particularly with World Chase Tag. I will say I am opposed to it 100%. However, if they change how they're approaching it, I wouldn't be opposed. And that's in that they're trying to be too much parkour. The whole we're only going to invite parkour teams. Again, it's seeping into parkour, and it's following a path that is going to do more or less what I'm afraid of, particularly as the word parkour gets more associated with it. Whereas if they actually do what Ultimate Tag does, which is bring in more regular people and be like, and then here's the parkour guy and he freaking murdered everybody. Then I think that would be better for parkour, particularly because you could still be a parkour athlete that doesn't practice tag. But I don't know, we got a kid in the gym right now that wants to be a pro tagger, Holden. Yeah. He wants to be, and he's telling me these moves he's coming up with and stuff. And I just don't. It's okay, you got goal, great for you, but I can't really help with that. That's not what I do. I'm not gonna sit around with you and geek out on, and some people in parkour might freaking love that. That's fine for them. It's just that all the things that we point to, particularly right now in parkour, that we get excited about, videos that come out, moves that athletes do, have nothing to do with tag. And I don't know anyone who's actually posted a tag video in parkour and been look at this move he did, look at this evasion. It's you see posts like that and no one gives a shit. It's except for people on the internet that don't do parkour. They care.
There's been some cool tags. I've seen some
I'm really on the other side of this because we talked earlier about martial arts, right? So I was really influenced by MMA and by Matt Thornton's idea of aliveness in martial arts, right? So in martial arts, it's you have techniques and you practice techniques, and then the expression of the techniques is whether you can actually fight. But in order to fight, you have to fight, right? You have to train in a way that in some way simulates fighting. And so, 2010, 2009, I think, it was after Teg's Rage flew me, right? Or maybe it was around the same time. I was well, look, if we're training to reach or escape, you need. Sometimes when you're reaching or escaping, there's nobody else involved, right? If you just need to get out of a burning building, you just get out of the burning building. But sometimes you're chasing down a mugger. Sometimes you're being chased. These are the type of situations that theoretically we're training for, and being able to get around somebody. And I've always been interested in self-defense as well. So I'm interested in how does somebody juke and get around and evade and escape somebody. All that's super fascinating to me. I went through a period recently where I was just bored watching any parkour video, but I would go watch World Chase Tag videos over and over again to look at the timing of how someone recognizes where someone's going to move on the course, how they dodge, people, you could just see people making the same mistakes over and over again. There's a closed and an open side, right? Everyone stands in one corner, and there's one side that has bars you have to go through and one side that's open, right? So if you're going to run down this open side, you need to initiate your run relatively early because it's very early for that. Very easy for the athlete who's coming across to do that. And you see really good athletes just make this mistake. And I was oh, this is fascinating because there's an actual game, right? It's fascinating the way that martial arts is fascinating to me. So I'm super, super engaged by it. The one thing that I don't like about it is that parkour is about adaptation to the environment. And this is an environment that's unchanging. It's going to be the same every time. So I think it has to have a combination of what you guys are doing, which is creating unique, totally specific spaces. But I would love to see there be that within the parkour competition world, there is a reach or escape element where you have to deal with other players. Because for me, that's like it's like having martial arts competitions where you never actually hit somebody if you don't have a chase and evade element.
Yeah, I mean, I see it like there's room for both competition formats. I don't, we'll probably never do a tag event at, in Sport Parkour League, but I don't think that's what we're good at or what we're interested in pushing. So, but I think, there's room for World Chase Tag to exist and develop and there's going to be certain athletes that are interested in joining it, and there's certain athletes that are definitely not interested in it. The funny thing, well, you kind of brought up is like non-parkour. We need non-parkour people to go and do this, World Chase Tag. I don't think anybody wants to. I think it's mostly parkour people who are excited about it. So
I don't know. I don't know.
Like kind of putting their skills to the test.
Yeah, this is all like
saying non-martial artists should try MMA, right? It's like, I mean, sure, but they're not going to do very well.
Well, the thing about like, and you're talking about like reach escape and stuff, and I kind of wanted to talk about that a bit because, I mean, I convinced myself for years that I was training reach escape, or actually not really. I think I started to think a bit more critically about it or pretty early, but it was always kind of part of it. But some of the stuff that I did early on in parkour, like some of the qualities I trained. We'll talk about like the precision jump. Freaking love precision jumps. It's like the greatest freaking thing you can do with your body. Like freaking just like jump through the air. I'm just gonna catch onto this thing with my feet and then like stay there like perfectly. Not just make the distance, but just like I'm on there, right? And you'll never see that in chase tag, but you'll never see that in like a reach escape scenario. Almost. I mean, I don't know. Maybe some authorities are chasing me on top of a roof, and there's an I-beam, and I got to jump to, and it's just like stuck. You guys can't get over here. I'm on this freaking I-beam. But like that's like the one scenario, where that sort of thing. I don't know. The development of precision jumps in general is kind of a crazy thing to think about because I don't know if what it is now, which is just like what I'm, describing is completing the challenge was the initial intent when the founders were practicing it. Like if their intent was more getting really good at just judging distance and everything, and they weren't so much on like the clean stick, but now it's like there's a very like specific position that you're after and everything with sticking a jump that is becoming more and more popular, particularly like in places like the UK. It always seems they'll make fun of other countries and places for like their stick technique, so I don't know, it's like it's very hard for me to get sold on like anything kind of if we're bringing in the argument of like reaching and escaping, because it's never what I was really doing with parkour, and it's definitely not what I'm doing now. And even on if we're talking about like traditional parkour, like point A to point B or something, that is like, I'll get really into a challenge. That's another thing I'll get really into is like any sort of like line or challenge where it's like, holy shit, this was the most efficient way to do this. Like there's this, I got to actually use a Kong in a scenario where it's like, this would be the fastest way. But I had to rehearse it a bunch. It's not going to be my reaction. I think you were talking about your experience playing tag competitively, and like you just reverted to like dash vaults or whatever it is. I think that's what you told me. Is like just, and maybe that wasn't even the fastest way, but it was like the most reactive thing that you ended up doing, was just like dash vault everything. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. Like I had the opportunity to like kind of practice on the field, and I had come up with all these different striding lines that I was going to use to evade. And then when it came down to it, all I did was run, speed vault, and dash vault. And so it was just like, oh, I didn't use any of the pre-planned motions that I had planned in my head. And and when somebody's chasing you, just started reacting. So it was kind of interesting to see where my level of training descended to. When I was put under the fire, in a sense.
So here's an interesting question. How many times has anyone used a speed vault or a dash vault in a sport parkour course?
Speed vault, like
Speed vault happens.
dash vault does too, but I feel like when people do it, it doesn't help. It's like they get exposed for using it. Like, I'm gonna do a dash vault here. This is gonna be the fastest thing ever, and then you just watch the playback or whatever someone else running, and you're like, that didn't work out.
I would say speed vault is definitely used, and definitely has been shown to be faster than other movements in certain scenarios.
There's also a moment that should be fresh in my mind too, because it was last year's competition, the first course where which we're gonna have actually up on Sport Parkour YouTube in a couple months, re-edited, but there was that first part of the course where they ascend up onto the mezzanine, they run off, and then they have to get over a railing to then do like the highline strides. And I think saw a lot of speed vault or step vault, and it should be fresh in my mind because I'm editing this right now, but I don't think I saw a dash vault on that one.
Yeah, I think speed or step was preferable.
There may have been a hurdle or two.
There was an interesting I can't remember which course it was, but Hendo versus Brody, and Hendo used a speed vault variation, and Brody did not. And Hendo, they were like neck and neck. If you watch,
did Brody just jump, or did he?
Can't remember what move he used. It might have been a Kong or something. But Hendo's was like he gained additional, or he gained additional
using that technique. Yeah, I was like going back and watching, like, like where an athlete's ahead and where they fall behind with the NPC stuff and Sport Parkour stuff. Like Kong vaults, often really, really slow unless there's a really good reason to use one.
Yeah,
it's too much airtime.
Yep.
Kongs are good for getting up on top of things.
Yes.
Not necessarily for clearing gaps.
I mean, I think there's places, but one thing that the reason that I brought up that you use them in this in the tag format is that I think that in the gym-based course format, it seems like vaults are pretty low priority as a skill relative to how they're trained in the sport, right? Like, so when you set up a skill challenge, there's going to be a Kong pre, right, or of some kind. But very frequently, there's a better way to do it, no matter how you set up the course, right? I think part of that is the constraints of having to build a course in a small space, right? And if you had larger spaces to clear and then a single object, all of a sudden some of these techniques that we train a lot end up being more valuable. But also, like, how you adapt when you're being chased versus how you adapt when you're able to pre-plan your route. It's two different things, right? So there's aspects of what we train that are brought out by a chase-based format potentially that we wouldn't see necessarily if we were only using a coursing-based format.
Yeah, I'm not actually opposed to chase as like a training method, particularly for like getting better at speed courses. So you have someone, in a speed class, let's say, or like a coach session, and they're running a course, and then, okay, this time, like, Tom, I'm gonna run the course behind you, like by, a second or something, and I'm gonna try to tag you the whole time. So it's like, what has to happen for this drill is like, if you mess up your plan, you have to adapt, come up with like nothing, which would happen in a live scenario. Whereas if you were just practicing by yourself, you might, like we said, a lot of people just stop. Like I've heard you like shouting at the kids sometimes, like to keep going, even if they mess up their run. But if you're being chased, it all of a sudden incentivizes to keep moving and then get those like adaptation skills. And some of the best like course runners, they end up with like what we call like the scrappier run, and it's likely because there are some like adaptations happening and they're able to flow with it.
Yeah, there's been some really interesting examples of adaptation on during course runs. Like Charles Pujad comes to mind. Like he messed up last year and still managed to like get scrappy and finish the course in a way that he hadn't planned. And he like obviously messed up his top. He messed up his ability to do his fastest time, but he still managed to get a very fast time by reacting in the moment and being able to respond to the changes that he was experiencing.
You know, it's an amazing example of adaptive stuff was the last NAPC that I competed at, Jesse LaFleur, on the little run along. There was a wall run, a weird wall run to a bar, and he fell off the bar and was able to catch and swing himself around and come up on the other side and tag the ending flag. And, you know, basically it was completely reactive, but it ended up actually being a very fast way of solving the problem, but, you know, came out of a complete mistake. So that's one of the reasons why I really love, like, I want to, my own parkour training, my own training and the way that I train people, I want to move more towards having chasing activities as central, because I want people to have improvisational ability. And I want people to be able to deal with the pressure of another person, to be able to react, and, you know, to read and react is central to being an adaptive athlete in any type of situation. And what we do a lot of time in parkour when we set up a course is that we are volitionally pre-planning the route, and we're not getting that read and react adaptation. So that's why I'm super interested in that type of thing.
I think I always lean towards like what I see parkour as like a combination of.
Yeah.
And I can totally understand where you're coming from because of what you've been building for the last few years and kind of like what you started doing early on. But I think what ultimately like made me fall in love with parkour and stay with it is what it feels like a combination of. And for me, that's like, it's a combination of skateboarding, rock climbing, maybe we could talk about like ski, snowboard, mountain sports, and like it kind of falls into a lot of the, if you take all the similarities of those things, like that's what the culture and the sport feels like. None of those have tag, but but again, you have events in climbing and skiing where it's a course and it's fastest time, and I don't know, maybe like we were just talking about doing speed course training and adding an element of chase or something to kind of force some aliveness, as you like to say, with it. And I wonder if that happens in climbing or any of those other sort of things. Like if someone who's like a speed climber ever has someone like try to chase them up there, but probably not. You know, it's not enough variety in that format to.
Yeah, the problem I see with speed climbing personally is the route never changes. So like,
well, that's right. Yeah.
The only thing you practice is the same exact, the same set of moves. If you get it right last time, if you don't, then
it doesn't make sense to practice aliveness then.
But if you guys know who Dan Osman is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a video of Dan Osman and his buddy like tackling themselves off of a wall, and you know, like racing up a wall and, you know, doing that stuff. So it's absolutely you know, there's no. I'm sure people have explored it, but yeah, like traditional climbing is so slow, right? It's like, you know, it's very much like, you know, well, you just die.
It's too hard to be fast.
It's too hard to be fast, too hard to chase, right?
You have that, like, I just kind of speaking out of my realm here, but like in climbing, you do have certain routes that get completed faster over time. Like I'm even thinking of like free soloing, and the whole thing with free soloing is like you can do shit faster. You're not like setting your clips and stuff. You're just going.
How long did it take Alex Honnold to free climb El Capitan, right? It was like 2 hours and 47 minutes or something. And the first time that someone went up, it was like several days. Yeah. So I have to go at 11 here. So I don't know how much time we have to talk about this, but one thing I wanted to pick your brain about, Rene, is your approach to training parkour athletes, right? And strength training side of it, because I think that's one of the subject matter expertise that you've really dived much more deeply into than most folks. So let's talk a little bit about the off-season training guide, right? Or Bible, I should say. Making some high claims with that. Why do you think parkour athletes should be strength training to start with?
It's a good question. It's like a big part of the theme that I often question myself sometimes, because I was the guy that wasn't talented in parkour starting out, and still, like I don't consider myself like at an elite level in any shape or form of like what other people are doing, and I turned to lifting weights a lot because it would give me improvements at certain things. And then I know you've had experiences yourself where you had the same thing happen, where, you know, turning to strength training and sort of like a general approach with that would give you some improvement, and then that improvement would stop.
Yeah.
And so part of that is just, you know, further going into the study of like, okay, what does it mean to train like an elite athlete, and what do they do? And the answers you'll find are varied, because you'll have people that are in the elite world that just, you know, you could have someone who's an elite jiu-jitsu player and they just do jiu-jitsu. And then you can have another elite jiu-jitsu player who does a jiu-jitsu plus a broad spectrum of like other things that they need. So it's, I've come to terms with the idea that it's a case-to-case thing. And I avoided putting a lot of like published, I guess, a published framework like I've put out now. I avoided putting up for a while. A lot to, I guess, like my own detriment too, because I think if I had done this earlier, it probably would have been more successful. And so now I have like stuff out there for free for people to take a look at. And a lot of my justification around it is that I made something that's like a template that you can adjust for yourself, but I didn't like water it down. I didn't make it a template where it's like, you could just do this once a day or once a week, or, you know, twice a week. It's like, no, this is something that, you know, it's basically, here's your 5-day-a-week schedule, but here's the ways you can adjust it based on how you're feeling or where you feel like your strengths are. So it is pretty loosely defined like that. And I justify it basically feeling that it would benefit anyone. I'm confident that if anyone who is kind of taking what they're doing now for parkour, that if they started following it, they would get some benefit of it, assuming that they can handle it. So one of the disclaimers I give is like, if you only train a couple of days a week, this is going to seem like a lot, and there's going to be a adaptation period. But it also might give someone like the kick in the ass they need to actually be able to train more.
Yeah, I wrestled with the same thing, which is that like a surprising number of really, really good athletes aren't doing any sort of ancillary training, or very limited or very stupid ancillary training. You're like, really, all you do is static stretch? I'm not really sure that that's very responsible for your excellence. And over the years, I've come to think that parkour is a pretty powerful athletic development system on its own. But it's basically like, if you get the gains from doing parkour, then just do it, right? Yeah. But some people aren't, right? We're going to run into plateaus. And I think my basic theory on it is that whenever you're focused on technical development, you're not going to be able to precisely dose your physiological demand as easily, right? So if you can create physiological headroom between you and your technical limits, then you can train at your technical limits and be less likely to get injured, less likely to overstress yourself, right? So that, like, if you're a 16-year-old naturally athletic male, right, who's into parkour, like, it's a good chance that you can just do it because you've got the kind of buffer to like exceed your demands or not get to your demands or whatever, and your body's going to respond really positively because of the hormonal environment. But if you're like a 38-year-old guy with 3 kids and a full-time job, like it's a lot easier to accumulate some overuse injuries by just utilizing your primary sport as your conditioning system. And so I think about it as a way of saying, okay, my body's going to need to have this level of strength, this level of elasticity, this level of cardiorespiratory, et cetera, this level of mobility and motor control in these joints to meet the demands of what I'm going to ask for it technically. And if I can not sacrifice my training time and energy too much and get a little bit ahead of that, then I'm going to be a lot safer. That's kind of how I think about it now. And it's like,
it's like more like a longevity approach for you.
It's partially it's longevity, but I mean, it is also skill progression, because when you have that physiological headroom, then you can progress faster, and it's easier to get there when you're always balancing that demand between like how specific is the adaptation you're creating versus how specific is the technical adaptation you're creating. Like if you do, if you're working on a jump, right, almost all the jumps that we do are submaximal. And so you're getting elastic demand and you're getting all these things, but you're not necessarily hitting your maximal. And and if you want to spend the time to get the skill, then you're not necessarily targeting like a really like an optimal amount of inroad physiologically, or an optimal sort of like which tissues you're demanding of, or which, are you demanding fast twitch? Like if you're doing your 100th wall run in a row, like now maybe you're using your type 1 tissues more than you would be if you'd only done 20, but maybe neurologically and technically you're getting some benefit out of it. But that thing is still limited by the ability of those type 2 fibers. And if you're not doing something that's building the capacity of those type 2 fibers, then you're going to hit a limit there, no matter how good your technique is. And so that's kind of how I look at it.
So I actually got a question from Tom. I'm going to let you kind of take this one.
Okay.
So if you if you had to define like, okay, what does a person need to win a sport parkour speed challenge? We'll use speed as like a, so I think it's probably the one we can look at as being like the most not the most athletic. Well, let's do speed anyway. Okay, so we're trying to prepare someone for speed. We're trying to take like maybe a kid or someone young for speed. Like, what do you think they would need to be the best?
Supreme mental fortitude.
So number one, mental, number one. But like what else? So like if because like let's say because I think we can think of some athletes that have that maybe wouldn't win speed. So like that's number one, and I would totally agree.
Yeah. They need technical proficiency. They need to be able to like get through the course, deal with the complexity of the environment, and then they need the ability to go fast. They need to be able to like sprint very quickly. So I would say those are like the top 3 that come to mind.
I think a lot of what we see is trying to aim towards. So like, again, agreed. It's like, okay, so what makes one good at parkour? We're seeing more and more that it's like the mental, the technical proficiency. And then you have some people where it's just like they have those 2 things, like the naturals, if you will, right? And their body just does what they tell it to do. They're able to go through it. And then I think what we also see on speed courses is like the need to actually have some explosiveness and some actual like raw speed in addition to all that, which is some of what you would develop in a training block and then be able to either maintain or build on outside of the block. So kind of going back to like what the stuff I've put out there is like I'm not, if you look at what I have, it's not saying do this all year. In fact, the blocks are like pretty short, and I shortened it from like my previous edition too. And I don't think anyone in parkour is really above that if they're really trying to be like the best. And currently in the world, I'll say being the best is not a popular thing right now amongst like practitioners of things. It's like a lot of memes and stuff where it's like, you don't need to be the best, you can just do this for fun. And like, I'm not against that or anything, but I'm also a big fan of trying to be the best. So
excellence is meaningful.
Yeah. And because I spent so much time leaning towards the strength and conditioning approach, it's why I'm able to, you know, kind of finally like publish something and put it all out there. But I also spent, I don't know, maybe the last like 5 years or whatever, doing a lot less strength and conditioning, and then kind of landing on something that I'm happy with, or where I feel like, okay, this is the right amount and this is what I'm going to do. But that was a struggle, was going from that, just doing a lot of strength and conditioning, to feeling like this isn't doing shit for me anymore. I really just need to actually like do more parkour, to, I feel like I was hitting that jump a couple years ago and it feels really hard now. And I want to be able, and like some of my goals need to be able to hit that jump. So I do need to do a little bit more of like the general prep again. And for some people that can be like you were talking about, not doing enough maximal effort jumps in parkour. And so for some people that might just be mean like hitting just like a field and just doing some actual maximal effort plyometrics or jumping. And then, you know, whether or not you want to season that with a little bit of strength building, using barbell or other means, that's, you know, entirely up to a own person's decision.
Yeah. We'll have to take that up. I think there's a lot more for us to discuss there. This is super fun, guys. We should do it again. Origins Parkour, if folks want to check you out, you got the off-season training Bible on there.
Mm-hmm. Also got sportparkourleague.com.
Sportparkourleague.com. So if folks want to...
Sport Parkour League on YouTube, or is it just Sport Parkour on YouTube?
Sport Parkour League on YouTube, Sport Parkour on Instagram.
Yeah, we're really trying to build that YouTube channel for Sport Parkour right now. So, and we got some exciting stuff we're releasing. So subscribe to that.
Excellent. Okay, I have to go. I literally have a meeting that starts right now. It was really fun chatting with you guys, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. Adios.
Thanks for listening to the Evolve, Move, Play podcast. If you want to support what we're doing, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notifications button so you know what's coming up. And of course, the biggest support you can give is to become a Patreon supporter. This is what's going to allow us to grow this platform more than anything else. So this is entirely listener supported, and we really appreciate your support. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.